What if I told you that one of the most spectacular battles in all of Westeros history never made it to your screen? We're not talking about some minor skirmish or forgotten tourney. We're talking about a trial by 7, a combat so brutal, so consequential that it changed the entire course of the Seven Kingdoms. This wasn't just 14 men fighting for honor. This was a battle where princes died, where the line of succession shattered, and where a simple hedge knight became a legend. Welcome back to the channel, and today we're diving deep into the trial by 7 at Ashford Meadow. The epic confrontation that Game of Thrones never filmed, but that a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is about to bring to life. If you're excited to see this battle unfold on screen, make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're breaking down everything you need to know about this legendary moment. Before we get into the blood and chaos of Ashford, we need to understand what a trial by 7 actually is. In the world of Westeros, trial by combat is already familiar to us. We saw Bronn dance around Vardis Egan in the Eyrie, we watched the mountain crush Oberyn Martell's skull, and we witnessed the Hound battle Beric Dondarrion with flaming swords. But a trial by 7? That's something entirely different. It's bigger, deadlier, and far more ancient. The trial by 7 came to Westeros with the Andals thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. It's rooted in the faith of the Seven, the dominant religion of the Southern Kingdoms. The concept is both simple and terrifying. Instead of one champion facing another, each side assembles 7 warriors. 14 men enter the field. The battle continues until one side is completely defeated, either through death or surrender. There's no time limit, no mercy, no walking away. The gods themselves are believed to judge the outcome, making the victor's cause just and righteous in the eyes of the faith. Here's what makes it so rare and so dangerous. Finding 6 other men willing to die for your cause isn't easy. These champions aren't mercenaries. They're knights putting their lives on the line for what they believe is right. If you can't find 6 men to stand with you, you're declared guilty automatically. The logic is brutal but clear. If your cause is truly just, good men will fight for it. If you stand alone, even the gods have abandoned you. By the time of Duncan the Tall's trial in 209 AC, it had been a full century since the last trial by 7. The previous one, that was King Maegor, the Cruel, fighting for his right to rule against the Faith Militant's champions. Out of 14 men who entered that battle, only Maegor walked off the field alive, though he fell into a coma immediately after from his wounds. So when Prince Aerion Targaryen demanded a trial by 7 at Ashford, everyone knew they were about to witness history. The tourney at Ashford Meadow was supposed to be a celebration. Lord Ashford held it to honor his daughter's 13th birthday, and it drew knights and nobles from across the 7 kingdoms. Among those who arrived was a towering hedge knight calling himself Sir Duncan the Tall. Dunk, as he was known, was a nobody. He'd served as squire to an old hedge knight named Sir Arlan of Pennytree, who had recently died. With no proof of his knighthood except his own word, Dunk had to be vouched for by Prince Baelor Targaryen himself just to enter the tourney. But Dunk had something many highborn knights lacked. He had a sense of justice that wouldn't bend. When he met a Dornish puppeteer named Tanselle Too-Tall, she agreed to paint a new sigil on his shield, a kindness he wouldn't forget. That night, Tanselle performed a puppet show featuring a traditional Dornish song about a knight defeating a dragon. For most people, it was harmless entertainment. For Prince Aerion Targaryen, it was treason. Aerion Brightflame, as he was called, was everything wrong with Targaryen royalty distilled into one sadistic prince. He was the son of Prince Maekar and nephew to the heir apparent, Prince Baelor Breakspear. Aerion saw himself as a dragon in human form and believed common laws didn't apply to him. When he took offense at the puppet show, he didn't lodge a complaint. He attacked the puppeteers with his guards, smashing their props and breaking Tanselle's fingers one by one. Duncan the Tall, all 6 feet 11 inches of him, came rushing to her defense. He didn't think about consequences. He didn't calculate the political ramifications. He saw a woman being brutalized by a prince, and he did what a true knight should do. He struck Aerion across the face and kicked him when he was down. For a commoner to lay hands on a prince of the blood, the punishment was clear: death, or at best, the loss of the hand and foot he used in the attack. But Dunk had one option. He could demand trial by combat. And Aerion, cruel and vindictive, made sure it wouldn't be a simple duel. He demanded a trial by 7. Finding 6 men to die alongside you when you're a landless hedge knight with no coin and no connections? That's an impossible task. Dunk was facing execution by default because who would stand with him against 3 Targaryen princes and the King's Guard? But Duncan the Tall had something money couldn't buy. He had honor that people recognized, and he had help from an unexpected source, his squire Egg, who was actually Prince Aegon Targaryen, the youngest son of Prince Maekar. The first to step forward was Sir Raymoon Fossaway, a young squire and cousin to Sir Steffon Fossaway. Raymoon had befriended Dunk during the tourney and believed in his cause. There was just one problem: Raymoon wasn't a knight yet. Dunk hesitated to knight him. His own dubious knighthood made him uncertain he had the right. But more champions arrived. Sir Robin Riesling pledged himself to Dunk's side. Then came the 2 Humphreys, Sir Humphrey Beesbury and Sir Humphrey Harding, who had personal reasons to hate Aerion after the prince deliberately killed Harding's horse during the tourney. But the real game changer came through Egg's connections. The boy prince convinced Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm himself, to join Duncan's cause. Lionel was heir to Storm's End, a giant of a man nearly as tall as Dunk and one of the finest fighters of his generation. He didn't join because he believed in justice or honor, though he likely did. He joined because he wanted the glory of fighting in the first trial by 7 in a century. He wanted to test himself against the King's Guard, and he wanted to, in his own words, tweak Prince Maekar's nose. Just when it seemed they had enough, Sir Steffon Fossaway betrayed them. Steffon announced he would fight for the Accusers instead, lured by Aerion's promise of a lordship. His betrayal stung Raymoon deeply. The young Fossaway begged to be knighted so he could take his cousin's place. Dunk still hesitated, but Lionel Baratheon stepped in and performed the ceremony himself. Sir Raymoon Fossaway changed his sigil from the red apple of his house to a green one, founding a new branch of House Fossaway in that moment. They still needed one more champion. Dunk made a desperate public appeal, standing before the assembled nobility and begging for a 7th man. The silence was deafening. No one wanted to risk their life for a hedge knight who'd struck a prince. Dunk was moments away from being declared guilty by default when a voice rang out across the field. Prince Baelor Breakspear himself, Hand of the King and heir to the Iron Throne, announced he would be Duncan's 7th champion. The crowd erupted. Baelor believed Duncan had acted rightly, protecting the weak as every true knight must. Even though his own nephews were among the accusers, even though 3 of his father's King's Guard would fight against him, Baelor would let the gods decide if Duncan was right or wrong. The accusers' side was a terrifying assembly of royal power and martial skill. Leading them was Prince Aerion Targaryen himself, wielding a morningstar and wearing the arrogance of someone who would never truly face consequences. Beside him rode his older brother, Prince Daeron Targaryen, called Daeron the Drunken. Daeron had his own reasons for being there. He'd been drinking at an inn when he was supposed to be squiring with his youngest brother Aegon. To cover his absence, he'd falsely claimed that Duncan had kidnapped the prince. Now, he was stuck fighting a battle he didn't believe in. The 3rd prince was Maekar Targaryen, Aerion's father. Maekar was no sadist like his son, and he was no drunk like Daeron. He was a warrior prince, hard and disciplined, who'd proven himself in the Blackfire Rebellion at the Battle of Redgrass Field. Maekar fought for his son, not because he approved of Aerion's actions, but because family loyalty demanded it. The tension of facing his own brother Baelor across the field must have been unbearable. Then came the King's Guard. 3 of King Daeron's 7 white cloaks rode for the accusers. Sir Roland Craycall, a knight of House Craycall, Sir Willem Wild, experienced and deadly, and Sir Donal of Duskendale, who would prove to be one of the most dangerous men on the field. These weren't ceremonial guards. They were elite warriors sworn to defend the king and his family. The 7th champion for the accusers was Sir Steffon Fossaway, the turncoat cousin who'd betrayed his own kin for the promise of advancement. Steffon wore the traditional red apple of House Fossaway, while his cousin Raymoon now bore the green. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Before the battle began, Prince Baelor gave his champions critical tactical advice. He noted that the Accusers would charge with heavy war lances designed to kill in the first pass. Duncan's side should use tourney lances, which were twice as long. They'd strike first, unhorsing their opponents before the war lances could reach them. It was sound strategy that might save lives. Baelor also pointed out something crucial. The three Kingsguard were sworn never to harm him, their prince. He could engage them directly while his champions focused on the others. It gave Duncan's side a massive tactical advantage. But as we'll see, even the best plans fall apart when 14 men charge at each other with murder in their hearts. When the signal was given, 14 horses thundered across the field of Ashford Meadow. Lances splintered, men screamed, horses crashed to the ground. The initial charge was pure chaos, exactly as Baelor predicted. The longer tourney lances struck first, unhorsing several of the Accusers' champions before they could close the distance. But once the lances were gone and men drew swords, maces, and axes, it became a brutal melee with no rules and no mercy. Dunk found himself facing Prince Aerion directly. The sadistic prince came at him with that morning star, the spiked ball whirling through the air. Aerion was skilled, vicious, and convinced of his own superiority. He knocked Dunk from his horse and struck him in the head hard enough to leave the hedge knight dazed in the mud. Aerion laughed, taunting him, calling him a fool for defending a Dornish whore. But Dunk was hurt, not finished. As Aerion swung his Morningstar again, Duncan rolled into him, using his massive size to bring the prince crashing down. Then he grabbed Aerion's own shield and beat him with it, raining down blows until the prince's face was bloody and broken. Aerion tried to draw a poniard, a small dagger, to stab Dunk while they grappled. Duncan knocked it away and dragged Aerion's helm up, forcing the prince to look him in the eye. He demanded Aerion yield, his voice a roar that carried across the battlefield. And to everyone's shock, Prince Aerion Brightflame yielded. He withdrew his accusation right there in the mud. By the rules of the trial by 7, the gods had spoken. Duncan was innocent, but the fighting didn't stop immediately. Other champions were still locked in combat. Sir Humphrey Beesbury had been struck down by Sir Donnell of Duskendale, the Kingsguard, killing him in the press of battle. Sir Willem Wilde was wounded so badly he had to be carried from the field. Prince Daeron, the Drunken, had fought without conviction and was defeated. Across the field, Prince Maekar was unhorsed, his helm dented from a blow he couldn't even remember delivering. That blow, that single strike in the chaos of melee combat, would change the course of history. Prince Baelor Breakspear, the pride of the realm, had been fighting brilliantly. True to his prediction, the Kingsguard couldn't bring themselves to harm him directly, giving him room to maneuver and assist his fellow champions. But at some point in the swirling violence, Maekar's mace connected with Baelor's head. Maekar didn't know who he was striking. Baelor wasn't wearing his own armor. He'd borrowed his son's, which was lighter and offered less protection. The blow crushed part of the helmet inward, but Baelor kept fighting until Aerion yielded. When it was over, when Dunk had been declared innocent and men began to remove their helms, Baelor approached Duncan to congratulate him. He seemed drunk, swaying on his feet, his words slurred. People laughed, thinking the dignified prince had somehow gotten into wine. Then Baelor reached up to remove his helmet. When it came off, part of his skull came with it. The borrowed armor had failed him. His brother's blow had caved in his head. Prince Baelor Breakspear, Hand of the King, heir to the Iron Throne, perhaps the finest man in all the 7 kingdoms, collapsed into Duncan's arms and died. 3 good men dead to save a hedge knight's foot. That's how Dunk thought of it afterward, and the guilt would haunt him for years. Sir Humphrey Beesbury was killed in the fighting. Sir Humphrey Harding died of his wounds shortly after, and Prince Baelor Breakspear, the man who had championed justice and mercy, was gone. His funeral pyre burned bright, but it couldn't warm the cold that had settled over the realm. Prince Maekar was devastated. He knew people would call him Kinslayer, that whispers would follow him forever. He told Dunk he couldn't even remember the blow that killed his brother, asking if that was a mercy or a curse. Probably both, he concluded. Maekar marked the anniversary of Baelor's death every single year for the rest of his life. His son, Maester Aemon, later told Samwell Tarly that his father never found peace, that Maekar considered his eventual ascension to the throne as punishment for the blow that slew his brother. The political consequences were immediate and devastating. Baelor's death kicked off a cascade of tragedies for House Targaryen. The Great Spring Sickness swept through Westeros shortly after, killing Baelor's 2 sons along with King Daeron II himself. The crown passed to Aerys first, Baelor's brother, who never had children. More Targaryen heirs died in the following years, one even choking to death on his dinner. The family that had seemed to have an abundance of heirs suddenly found itself running out. Eventually, against all odds, Prince Maekar became king. The 4th son of a 4th son, a man who had outlived 3 brothers and countless nephews, sat the Iron Throne, never fully believing he deserved it. But the trial had one positive outcome. Maekar exiled Prince Aerion to the Free Cities, removing that sadistic influence from Westerosi politics, and he allowed his youngest son, Aegon, to continue squiring for Duncan the Tall. Maekar was a hard man, but he recognized something in Dunk. His other sons had known only privilege. Aerion was a monster, Daeron was a drunk, but Aegon, if he could learn humility and understand the small folk by traveling with an honest hedge knight, might become a better man than his brothers. It was the best decision Maekar ever made. Aegon, the boy who called himself Egg, would grow up to be King Aegon the 5th Targaryen, one of the most beloved rulers in Westerosi history. So why didn't Game of Thrones ever film this incredible battle? The answer is both simple and frustrating. The trial by 7 happens in the Hedge Knight, the first of George R.R. Martin's Dunk and Egg novellas. These stories take place nearly 90 years before the events of Game of Thrones. They're prequels, but they're not part of the main Song of Ice and Fire series. The showrunners, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, had their hands full adapting the core narrative. Adding a massive flashback to an event decades before the story would have required extensive resources, new casting for all the major players, and significant screen time that they clearly felt was better spent on the present-day conflicts. Think about what filming this battle would have required. You'd need 14 highly skilled stunt performers and actors. You'd need horses, armor, weapons, all period appropriate to nearly a century before the main show. You'd need to establish who all these characters were and why this mattered, which means even more screen time for backstory. Game of Thrones occasionally gave us glimpses of the past, like Bran's visions of the Tower of Joy or young Hodor becoming Hodor. But those were brief, focused moments directly connected to present-day mysteries. The trial by 7, as magnificent as it is, didn't have that direct connection to the wars for the Iron Throne happening in the show's present. But here's the exciting part. We're not going to miss out on seeing this battle after all. HBO's upcoming series, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, is adapting the Dunk and Egg novellas. The first season will adapt the Hedge Knight, which means we're finally going to see the trial by 7 brought to life with the production values HBO is known for. Peter Claffey is playing Duncan the Tall, and Bertie Carvel, a Tony Award-winning actor, is portraying Prince Baelor Breakspear. Everything we've talked about today, the assembling of champions, the political maneuvering, the brutal combat, and the tragic death that changed a kingdom is coming to our screens. After decades of readers knowing this story, the rest of the world is about to discover why the trial by 7 is one of the most important moments in all of Westerosi history. The ripples from Ashford Meadow spread across generations. Duncan the Tall eventually joined the King's Guard when his squire Egg became King Aegon V. He rose to become Lord Commander, one of the greatest knights to ever wear the white cloak. The friendship forged between a hedge knight and a disguised prince became one of the most important relationships in Targaryen history. Aegon V, influenced by his years traveling with Dunk, became known as Aegon the Unlikely. He implemented reforms to help the common people, tried to limit the power of the great lords, and genuinely cared about the small folk in a way few kings had before or since. The green apple and red apple split in House Fossaway became permanent. To this day in the books, there are 2 branches of the house, all because Raymond chose honor over his cousin's ambition. Sir Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, remained a fierce warrior and later became Lord of Storm's End. He supported Aegon V loyally until the king's son, Prince Duncan Targaryen, broke his betrothal to Lionel's daughter to marry a commoner named Jenny of Oldstones. That betrayal led to another trial by combat years later, with Duncan the Tall facing his old friend to settle the matter. Even the deaths mattered in ways beyond politics. Maekar's guilt shaped his entire reign as king. His stern demeanor, his harsh judgments, all of it stemmed from the brother he'd accidentally killed. Maester Aemon, another of Maekar's sons, refused the crown when it was offered to him, in part because he'd seen what the throne had done to his father. Aemon chose the Night's Watch instead, becoming the old blind Maester who advised Jon Snow centuries later. The trial by 7 at Ashford demonstrated something fundamental about Westeros. Justice, even when it comes from the gods themselves, is messy and imperfect. Duncan was innocent of the charges against him. The gods proved that, but the cost of proving it was 3 dead men and a destabilized realm. Baelor Breakspear, who might have been the greatest king since Aegon the Conqueror, died defending a hedge knight he barely knew because it was the right thing to do. That's a tragedy and the beauty of this story. Honor has a price, and sometimes good men pay it. The trial by 7 at Ashford Meadow is everything that makes George R.R. Martin's world so compelling. It's brutal, medieval combat with real stakes. It's complex characters making difficult choices based on honor, family, and personal conviction. It's political consequences that echo through generations, showing how one moment can reshape a kingdom. And it's deeply human, filled with grief, guilt, and the recognition that even victory can taste like ashes in your mouth. Game of Thrones gave us the Red Wedding, the Battle of the Bastards, and Daenerys burning King's Landing. Those were spectacular, shocking moments that defined the series. But the trial by 7 at Ashford is their equal in terms of historical importance and emotional weight. In some ways, it's even more impactful because it's about ideals clashing with reality. Duncan the Tall stood up for a woman being brutalized, and the ripples from that decision changed the world. When a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms finally brings this battle to our screens, we're going to witness something special. We'll see 14 men charging across a field, lances shattering, swords singing, and the fate of kingdoms hanging in the balance. We'll see Prince Baelor Breakspear's heroic stand and tragic death. We'll see Duncan's impossible victory and the beginning of his legendary friendship with Egg. And we'll understand why this trial, this ancient form of combat that came to Westeros with the Andals, matters so much to the story of Ice and Fire. So here's the question for you. If you had to choose 6 champions to fight alongside you in a trial by 7, who would you pick from the entire Game of Thrones universe? Would you go for raw power like the Mountain and the Hound? Would you choose skill like Jaime Lannister and Barristan Selmy? Or would you pick knights like Brienne and Ned Stark who fight for honor above all else? Drop your dream team in the comments below. And if you're as hyped as I am for a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and finally seeing this legendary battle brought to life, smash that like button and subscribe. We've got so much more Duncan Egg content coming your way, breaking down the characters, the politics, and every epic moment from this incredible series. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.